You can't be serious with your record on the honours system.
Welcome to WatchMojoUK, and today we're looking at times Ian Hislop went after the British government and those in power.
Before we begin, we publish new content every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.
Who do you want to be Prime Minister, dear? It's nice, Mr. Disraeli.
Number 10. Geoffrey Archer.
Correct. To whom did Archer say it was really like a breath of spring to meet you?
The late Robert Maxwell. Takes one to know one.
He'd only recently resigned during this old Have I Got News For You episode from the 1990s, but has remained a consistent punching bag for Hislop ever since, emblematic of the lax standards that infested the government during the major years.
After awarding Kathleen Burnett first prize in a short story competition, what did Archer do?
Steal the story and pretend it was his own in a next collection.
Archer was found to have committed perjury during a libel case from the 1980s and was sent to prison for this in the early 2000s. Ian had Archer's crimes and lies memorised and was grilled about them by Angus Deaton during this segment that never originally made it to air, but it's now available for all to see.
Which post, which never existed, did Archer claim his father had held?
He said his father was a colonel in the Somerset Light Infantry who'd won a Distinguished Conduct Medal. Which he hadn't.
Who knows, maybe Hislop will one day be a contestant on Celebrity Mastermind for real.
During an athletics race at Oxford in October 1963, what achievement propelled Archer into the national press?
He was hit by a discus, amusingly.
And stretchered off whilst competitors cheered.
Number 9. Theresa May.
Yes, I'm really the person for the job. And everything's going very...
Back in 2017, Theresa May was still the Prime Minister, just about. Despite being an ardent Remainer, following Cameron's resignation, May was the one trusted with Brexit, and by all accounts, she did a very bad job.
Well, Ian Duncan Smith used to cough a lot. Do you remember? He was another successful Tory leader.
But what sticks out was the moment from the 2017's Tory party conference, where she delivered one of the worst speeches of her career. Yes, even cringier than the time she was heckled in Wales.
Yep. Public sector working together.
She coughed throughout her speech, taking frequent water breaks, and was at one point notoriously handed a P45 by a comedian in the audience.
Oh dear.
I did.
I think I'm coming across as a bad person.
Hislop didn't let her live it down on the subsequent episode of Have I Got News For You, and he had a few things to say about Boris Johnson as well.
You know, she can't allow him the pleasure. It's like, you know, he's essentially an arsonist who wants to come back dressed as a fireman.
Yes.
Number 8. The Tory leadership election. In the midst of the first of 2022's two Tory leadership elections, Ian Hislop sat down for a long interview with online outlet Politics Joe, in which he was asked his opinions on the election.
The Tory leadership contest right now, it inhabits an alternate reality to the one
completely
that the rest of the electorate is experiencing right now.
He didn't mince his words, primarily attacking Truss, who had only just emerged victorious, and wondering whether she could actually unite the country or whether she'd fall at the first hurdle.
Well, I mean, there's a very good private eye cartoon said that the Tory party has a worst past the post system, which I'm afraid it does.
Well, with the benefit of hindsight, we know that she did, indeed, fall at the first hurdle. He attacked both major parties for not understanding the state the country is in, or what issues the electorate, rather than the party membership, cares about, as well as, once again, Boris Johnson.
I mean, why doesn't he just go paintballing for a month if he wants to put on a flak jacket? I mean, it's cheaper for us. We don't have to pay for the typhoon to fly around.
Number 7. The Patterson Scandal. In 2021, Tory MP Owen Patterson was found to have breached his ministerial position by lobbying the House of Commons on behalf of private companies.
And they failed. Due to the fact that it was so bloody blatant that even they didn't get away with it.
Patterson's punishment for this, after an investigation, was to be suspended for a month. But even this was too much for him to bear, apparently, since the entire Tory party rallied around him and changed the House's lobbying rules.
The Commissioner for Standards looked into him, found he was guilty, said, "You did it." He said, "I didn't do it, it wasn't me, I haven't had a chance to plead my case." He had.
Hislop summarised and explained the details of the scandal on Have I Got News For You, taking the Tory party to task for letting Patterson get off scot-free for breaking the rules.
And then all his Tory mates started a campaign, and the Prime Minister said, oh, right, we're changing the entire system now.
But he soon resigned and triggered a by-election, while going on to claim that the investigation violated his human rights, bizarrely.
I mean, they should all be ashamed of themselves. It's absolutely disgraceful.
Number 6. Inheritance tax.
Inheritance tax.
Here it comes again.
Well, you know, it is... But
it's the one rhetorical point every Labour spokesman makes every time they're wheeled on.
As house prices spiral out of control, the burden of inheritance tax on younger generations only grows. An unpopular tax from the beginning, but frequently revived by the Labour Party whenever they get into government, it was Yvette Cooper who was sent onto Question Time to defend Labour.
I was here when Osborne announced it on Question Time. He got a big round of applause. All you lot sitting back in Central Office thought, oh, we'd better have one of those, and you brought it in. Why?
This was a big argument about potentially raising the inheritance tax threshold, with Hislop calling out Labour for simply copying everything the Tories were suggesting, since the Tories, in opposition at the time, had a huge lead in the polls. And as we know now, the next election led to over a decade of Tory rule in Britain.
And are they all very poor, the inheritance tax people that you benefit? They're not, are they? They're quite rich.
But no, actually that's not true, Ian.
No,
that's not
I think
true.
it probably is.
And the people... well, I think, you know, the only people...
Number 5. Barnard Castle.
He gave an hour and a half of utter twaddle. It's absolutely clear he did break the regulations. He found one tiny clause, which he said made an exception, but that didn't cover the journey, for example, to Barnard Castle.
During the pandemic, Have I Got News For You was briefly virtual, with the hosts and panellists calling in from home. There was no audience, but Hislop didn't need one, making his thoughts on the government's handling of the pandemic and the Dominic Cummings scandal clear.
The idea that you're not sure whether you can drive back to London, so in order to test your eyesight, you put your 4-year-old in the back of the car and drive around to see if you knock over any pedestrians.
Not only was Cummings on the receiving end of a classic Hislop rant, but so were other senior politicians, like Boris Johnson and Michael Gove, who were brought out to defend Cummings.
He said he's not an authority on driving, but he's been across all the media clearing Cummings completely, saying he didn't disobey any of the rules.
He got into the weeds of the controversy and explained exactly when Cummings was lying and how he was doing it to try and fool the country. Number 4. Press regulation.
I'm here to talk about the principle of the freedom of the press and the necessity of, or not, of state regulation.
As the editor of the UK's foremost satirical magazine and victim of countless libel actions, Hislop has a lot to say about the freedom of the press.
And we have a lot of laws in this country, and we don't need any more.
Following the phone hacking scandal and the Leveson inquiry, there were suggestions that the UK's presses could be state regulated, which Hislop was adamantly against. He didn't think the government has a right to say what can and can't be published, especially when the press has such a huge hole in criticising the establishment and the many miscarriages of justice it has overseen.
So the idea that then, given any say on the rest of the press, they will act responsibly, they won't. They'll punish those whose views they don't like, who won't play ball.
While the tabloid presses are definitely a blight, giving the government the power to censor news outlets is never justified.
But then every now and then the Daily Mail runs a story like the murderers of Stephen Lawrence shouldn't get off scot-free. They did murder him. We are going to campaign for 10 years until they get justice.
Number 3. Asylum Seekers.
It's amazing you can still say Rwanda with a straight face. I mean, that's an extraordinary achievement.
Following the 2023 Knowsley riots, in which there was a violent clash between far-right protesters and asylum seekers staying in a hotel in Merseyside, Ian Hislop was one of the pundits brought on to discuss immigration on Question Time.
The government puts asylum seekers in places which are already deprived, quite often because it's easier and cheaper.
Hislop went after Robert Jenrick, the immigration minister at the time. Despite the public largely agreeing that this plan won't work, the Tories were and are steaming ahead with it.
The reason people are in hotels and hostels for so long is because the backlog is so enormous.
Hislop attacked the government for its failure to properly process the asylum seekers who arrive in the country and how the Tories have relentlessly vilified them, leading to extreme violence.
And to blame the people in the hotels and the hostels for being there when the system has completely failed seems to be encouraging people to go round there with hammers and smash up police cars and say, it's your fault you're here.
Number 2. Partygate. Throughout his career, Ian Hislop has been Boris Johnson's staunchest critic. He was on hand throughout the pandemic to be a voice of reason, particularly during Partygate.
What will you all miss most of all about Boris, the Prime Minister? Ian?
I suppose I'll really miss being able to say this will end badly.
When Johnson finally left number 10 in 2022, Hislop was on Have I Got News For You to relive his greatest hits and all the times he'd mocked Johnson right to his face over the years.
Tonight, I'm wearing a tie with balloons on it, but it's not a party. This is a work event for me.
As always, Hislop saw straight through Johnson's many lies, and that those booze-filled Westminster nights during lockdown probably weren't necessary for the government to keep ticking.
Yes, I thought proving that he couldn't even run a panel show would immediately mean that people would say he should run the country. And so it happened just like that.
He likely shouldn't have taken all those holidays while still allegedly running the country, too. Number 1. The Post Office Scandal. Though this massive controversy was first broken by Computer Weekly, Private Eye also reported on it extensively over the years.
Really? One Lib Dem? Every single man in charge of the Post Office after that was a Conservative.
In early 2024, an ITV drama meant that this abhorrent story broke through to the public, and the outrage came thick and fast. Hislop was interviewed on Peston, where he attacked multiple governments for allowing this to happen for over 20 years.
Who was the Prime Minister when Paula Venables, the head of the Post Office, was given a CBE? It was a Conservative government, it was David Cameron, and he's still in the Cabinet.
Senior politicians were all trying to pass the blame, but the truth is that they were warned countless times, as were post office bosses, and the Horizon scandal just kept growing, leading to hundreds of prosecutions and even some tragic deaths.
This is really important. They told each one of the complainants, you are the only
one, yeah.
And that is straightforward fraud.
So let us know in the comments who you want to see Ian Hislop take down next.
I can't prove that, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Do you agree with our picks? Check out this other recent clip from WatchMojoUK and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.